Galaxy Fighter. This lesson is called Navigation Part 2. In this lesson, we will create code for our menus. We will also write code for smooth transition between the play layer and the aliens fight. The big boss is not yet implemented, so we will just make stub code for it. Once it has been created, we will use the same transition method for it as we have for the aliens. Let's now go to Xcode and write the code. We are inside Xcode. Our task is to make the menus and the dialogues that will hold together the game. Our plan is to use different scenes and to create a dialogue handler class that will handle the dialogues. We have one new sound, 4 new images, and 1 new font. We have 10 new classes. 7 of them have to do with new scenes, and 3 of them have to do with handling the dialogues and global data. We have 2 affected classes. The common class, where we define new constants, and the app delegate, which now will trigger the game by calling the welcome layer class. Let's look at our starting point. Here is our new sound called navigation.mp3. Let's listen to it. Here are the 4 new images: navigation background.png, arrow.png, alien art.png, and boss art.png. Here's our new font called Imagine 27. Let's take a look at our code. We begin by looking at the new constants in the common class. Here is a bunch of new constants, mostly having to do with distances and positions. There is also a constant defining a color and a constant defining a sound volume. We have 1 new Z order for our dialogues. Let's look at the app delegate, the implementation part. We are now beginning by running the welcome layer scene. Let's look at welcome layer, the interface part. As you can see, the welcome layer inherits from background layer, which is a new class here. In fact, all these layers here inherit from background layer. So let's take a look at background layer first, the interface part. It has 1 instance variable for the title and 1 instance variable for the back button. In the implementation part, we have 4 methods. Let's begin with init. First, we set up the background image, and then we check if the subclass is the welcome class. If it is, we do nothing. Otherwise, we set up the back button. The setup back button code is here. And as you can see, it is just the usual vanilla code for setting up buttons. Observe the callback function. Back tapped. When the user touches the back button, the CC director pops a scene from the stack. We also see a method called setupTitle. It takes a title as a parameter and sets up the title. This method will be called from the subclasses. Let's go back to welcome layer, the implementation part. In the initialization group, we have two methods, init and onEnter. In the onEnter method, we just look if any background music is playing, and if not, we play the sound navigation.mp3. The reason for doing it this way is that if navigation.mp3 is already playing, we don't want to restart it. In the init method, we start by adding the sprite sheet so it's available throughout the game. Then we set the title to Galaxy Fighter by sending the setup title message to the parent class. Then we call the setup buttons method. And then we set two global variables. We set the boolean alien done to no, and we set the level to 1. Let's take a closer look at the setup buttons method. First, we create a play button using the Imagine 27 font. We set the selector method to play tapped, which you can see up here. It pushes the current scene on the stack, and then it runs the play layer scene. Back to setup buttons. As you can see, we do the same for the how to play layer scene, and so on, for the rest of the scenes. Options, about, and submit. Finally, we put all buttons in a menu and add the menu to the current layer. Here below we also add an arrow in front of every button, just to make it look nicer. Let's now look at the option layer, the interface part. As you can see, it also inherits from the background layer. In the implementation part, we are setting up the title, and since the option layer is not the welcome layer, the back button will be automatically added by the parent layer. The about layer, how to layer, and submit layer are handled in the exactly same way. Let's now look at the play layer, the interface part. It also inherits from the background layer. As you can see, it has 3 instance variables, a node and 2 sprites. Let's look at the implementation. In the jump bar, we see 3 groups: initialization, setup, and selectors. Let's begin with the initialization. In the onEnter, we check if any background music is playing, and if not, we start playing navigation.mp3. In the init method, we set the title. And then we call setup buttons and setup images. In the setup images, we set up 2 images, but we make them invisible to begin with. Setup buttons works similar as the method with the same name in the welcome layer. We have 3 buttons: aliens, boss, and reset. One difference is that we check the global variable alien done. If true, we make the alien button gray and boss button white. If not, we do it the other way around. What associated selectors do our buttons have? The alien button has alien fight. The boss button has boss fight. And the reset button has reset tapped. Let's see what these selectors do. We'll start with alien fight. If the alien done is true, it just returns. But if it is false, then we hide the title and the buttons. We show an image of the alien, and we set up a dialog with one text and one button. To set up the dialog, we use the dialog handler singleton. We set up a callback method called startAlien, and when the user taps on the begin button in the dialog, this method is invoked. Let's see what it does. It replaces the current scene with the alien layer scene. Let's also look at bossfight method. If alien done is false, it just returns. Otherwise, we hide the title and the buttons, we show an image of the boss, and we set up a dialog with the start boss callback method.
And the start boss
just pops the welcome scene back. That's for now. When we create the boss layer, we will change this line here to replace the current scene to boss layer scene instead. Let's also look at reset tapped. As before, we hide the title and the buttons, and then we set up a dialog with one text and two buttons. The selector method is called resetConfirmed and will hold information of which button the user tapped. If the user tapped on the cancel button, then the string parameter will have the value first, and the only thing we then do is to show the title and the buttons as they were before. But if the user tapped the button yes, we set the global variables level and alien done to their initial values. In this way, we will ensure that the game is reset to its initial state. Let's now take a look at how to handle the return from alien layer scene back to our play menu. To do that, we go to Alien Dialog class, the interface part. First, we observe that Alien Dialog inherits from CC node. As you can see, it has three methods that are called when important events happen in the alien layer scene. When the current level is done, when all levels are done, and when the ship is dead. Let's look at the implementation part. The methods are grouped in four groups: the initialization and the three important events we just mentioned. Let's begin with the init method. It doesn't do anything except adding itself to the layer. Let's see what happens when we receive the ship is dead message. We set the score to 0, stop updating the game, and then we show the try again dialog. As you can see, this dialog sets up two buttons: to try again or to return to the play menu. If the user chooses try again, we start up the game again. If he chooses go to play menu, then we call the go to play menu tapped method that stops the background music and goes to the play layer scene. What happens when we receive the current level is done message? We set up a dialog with two buttons: to play the next level or to return to the play menu. If the user chooses play next level, we repair the ship, move orbit to start position, and start playing the alien background music. And then we start up the game. If it chooses go to play menu, then we go to play menu as before. Let's also see what happens when we receive the all levels are done message. We set up a dialog with one text label and one button. We inform the user that he has done all levels and thereby accomplished the mission. And now he can tap on the Go to the Play menu. When the user taps that button, then we go to Play menu as before. There is one more thing to do, and that is to take a look at the singleton classes, the Global Handler class and the Dialog Handler class. We'll begin with the Global Handler. It's a very simple class that keeps track of three variables: the score, the level, and the Boolean alien done. All three variables or properties, so any class can manipulate them. There are also two help methods that make it easy to increment the score and the level. In the implementation, we see that it is just as simple as we suspect. Let's now look at the dialog handler, the interface part. We have a text label and a menu that can hold one or more buttons. We have a layer, so we know to which layer to add the dialog. We also have a sender and a callback method, so we know which method to invoke over which object when the user taps on a button in the dialog. As you can see here below, we are declaring methods for three types of dialogs: a dialog with one label and one button, a dialog with one label and two buttons, a dialog with two buttons without any label. Let's look at the first method and see how we implement it. As you can see, there are several arguments provided by the caller: the layer, the text for the label, the name of the button, the position of the dialog, the receiver of the callback method, and the callback method to invoke. We first save some of these parameters, and then we make up the dialog and add it to the layer. For our button, we have chosen a selector called Button Tapped, and when the user taps on the button, that method is called. What does it do? First, it checks that the sender is not nil. It then hides the dialog and invokes the callback method. Using NSObject's performSelector method. The other dialogs are similar in structure, and you can take a look at them on your own. That's everything there is to it, so let's test this.
Mission accomplished.